Good morning. Isn't that a great reading? I love David White as a poet. Thank you all, Phoebe. What's your character's name?
Cherie Hollinger.
Cherie. Thank you, Cherie. You're doing a right fine job there. All right. That's the best my Southern accent for today. I better pretty much drop it soon. It's wonderful to be back with you today. Thank you very much. I noticed that since I have not been formally installed, I guess I'm still informally here, so I can still kind of be informal with you guys, which means I can wander around the stage. But the good thing about wandering around the stage, right, Michael, is that, is Michael back? Michael's not back there, but you guys, there you are, can follow me because we have a brand new camera back there, and I want to thank Michael and Damien for installing our new video camera and the endowment committee and all the people who contributed to it for making that possible. So thank you very much. If you've ever watched the video in the old days, first of all, you had to kind of stay within about this range right here because it wouldn't move very well. And if it did move, it sort of went jerk, 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 jerk like that. And now it's this nice smooth pan. So I get to play full stage, which I love. Which is good because today's topic is living creatively. Living creatively. And I want to open with a quote. I told Phoebe to be sure to leave that page up here because I have my quotes on the back of it. And this is from my friend Michael Beckwith, who says that everyone is in an act of creation, consciously or unconsciously. Creation is happening. But all creation isn't creativity. So creation is constantly happening. Look at the world today and you see creation happening. War, struggle, financial stuff, famines, disease, sickness. That's all creation. It's just happening. It's the old being recycled over and over and over again. Our old thoughts, our old consciousness just being recycled. Anybody besides me notice that that's kind of what's happening? We've kind of had that sort of, if you've been around as long as I have, you know, which is not as long as Bob has, but you know, maybe a third of that long, but but we get the feeling of we've been here before, we've done this before, we've seen all this before. And so that's the creation that's happening through it. The law, as Ernest Holmes would say, is constantly working through us. The question is, are we being creative? Are we operating in creativity? And creativity happens when we start to tap into the infinite. When we take the time, as the reading said, to be quiet and listen and start to reveal what the infinite wants to reveal through us. So today we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about letting the infinite reveal through us rather than us creating from the same old, same old. Does that sound good? Yes. Thank you. Just checking that you're awake today. I was telling Luke today is a really tough day for me. It's July. It's the Tour de France. This is the month that I live for. And in order to get here in time to do the meditation today, I had to leave 5 minutes before the race ended with all of it in suspense and a whole lot of good stuff happening. I want you to know how much I love you. I sacrificed myself just to be here. So creation is always happening. Creativity, we let the infinite create through us in its own unique expression, in its own unique way. Okay? You are here to be a unique expression. You may express the same love that everyone else is expressing, but you express it uniquely. We have all these wonderful poets, but they express poetry differently, each one uniquely. This group that's at the Riverfront Playhouse that's going to bring this play to us will express their unique iteration on the play, even though there's a script to follow, but theirs will be just their own little way, a little bit different. And probably it'll be different just about every single night, just very slightly, as they move through the time of being in that play. So how do we live creatively? I was unpacking many of you know that I just kind of recently moved about a month ago, and over the weekend I was turning my third bedroom from a storage unit filled with boxes and boxes to an actual guest bedroom because my daughters and her fiance are coming up for my installation and they were planning to stay there, and I thought that actually having a bed in there would be more comfortable than boxes to sleep on. So they're young, but maybe not that young. And I came across a book that I had bought back in about 1970 or 71 called Creativity and Taoism. And it just caught my eye. And I said, you know what, that book used to mean so much to me. And it's such an inspirational book as far as looking at creativity. I said, I'm going to work that into my talk today, to take a look at Taoism and what it expresses of creativity, because the Taoists have studied creativity deeply in that process. And so we're going to use that for a starting point. And to begin, I want to start with a Chinese poem. This is one of those wonderful, deep, short things. The wild geese fly across the sky above. Their image is reflected upon the chilly water below. The geese do not mean to cast their image on the water, nor does the water mean to hold the image of the geese. The geese don't mean to cast their image on the water, and the water doesn't mean to hold the image of the geese. When we're operating in creativity, when we're operating to simply express the nature of God, we don't necessarily have to figure out the meaning of what we're doing. See, when the geese are flying across the water and the water is reflecting their image, in that moment there's this beauty, in that moment there's this collapse of time and space. In that moment is the beauty, and yet they're not trying to make it beautiful, are they? They're just being. The geese are just being geese. The water is just being water. When we are in our pure state, being the divine that we are the beauty of the divine. We just simply make our lives beautiful. We make the world beautiful by simply being who you are. You don't have to be or force yourself to be something you're not in order to create beauty. Isn't that wonderful? So we tap into that. We start to let ourselves simply be the person that we are. To live creatively, we make our minds mirrors that reflect the divine. We make our minds mirrors that reflect the divine. Jesus said it this way, "Seek ye first the kingdom of God." Which is where? It's within us. It's within us. Seek ye first the kingdom of God. We seek not to be creative, but to be God in form. We seek to embody the quality of God that we want in form. Goethe said it this way, if you would create something, you must be something. If you would create something, you must be something. Years ago, I was organizing an event called the Walk for Peace with Hadarun Gandhi. It was the first ever season for nonviolence, and we were doing that. And I had organized a number of events before. And the process hadn't always been peaceful, shall we say. Anybody who's organized events or been part of organizing events probably knows that, especially if it's a large event and there's a bunch of money and there's a bunch of egos involved, it's not always a peaceful thing. And I made a commitment that on that event, I would organize the event from a consciousness of peace. That I would be peace, not the day of the event, but the day that I started as the event organizer. And it was a challenge because not everybody was working on that consciousness, and some were quite dramatically not working on that consciousness. But it's like to stay in that peace. If we would be something, if we would create something, we must be something. So what is it that you want to be? A couple of quotes. I'm going to compare Ernest Holmes and the Tao Te Ching. How's that? Ernest Holmes, we are surrounded by an intelligent force and substance from which all things come. The ultimate essence, I think this mic is on and I'm echoing. The ultimate essence in the invisible and subjective world of all visible and objective forms and conditions. Let me start that over again. We're surrounded by an intelligent force and substance from which all things come. The ultimate essence in the invisible and subjective world of all visible and objective forms and conditions. In other words, it all starts within. Mary Manamorsy says everything is created twice. First as the thought in mind, and then as the object out here. That chair you're sitting in was first a thought in somebody's mind. This church building was first a thought in somebody's mind, and then it got created in form. So within the infinite is all of that form. Chapter 21 of the Tao Te Ching puts it this way. That which is called Tao is indistinct and ineffable. Ineffable and indistinct, yet therein are forms. Indistinct and ineffable, yet therein are objects. Deep-seated and unseen, Therein are essences. Michelangelo said that when he was creating the statue of the David, he saw in the uncut block of marble the David within the block. And all he did was cut away everything that was not the David. Take a breath. When we want to create a life of creativity, when we want to live creatively, when we want to start to embody the infinite, we take away everything that is not that which we want to bring forward. We let it go. So then the question becomes, what am I seeking to be? It's not, what do I want? What am I trying to make happen in my life? What do I want to create? It's, what am I seeking to be? Am I seeking to be love? Am I seeking to be joy? Am I seeking to be wisdom? Am I seeking to be peace? What is it that I'm seeking to be? What is it that I want more of in my life? So many times we look at situations and we say, man, they should be more peaceful. They should, right? And anybody besides me ever point that finger out there? No, just me. Oh, a couple of people. Thank you very much for being honest. When really, in reality, when we start to look at it, we start to take it as a reminder to say, what is it that I want to be? So a friend of mine says, I watch the news because it gives me my prayer requests. And so we start to be what it is that we recognize needs to happen on the planet. We start to be the peace. We start to be the love. We don't have to figure out the creative process. We take away everything in our own lives that is not peace, that is not love, that is not joy, that is not health. So we cut away everything unlike that. When the artist reveals the reality, concealed in things, he sets it free, and in turn he liberates and perfects himself. When the artist reveals what's already there, he sets it free. Michelangelo set the David free. But he also liberates and purifies himself and perfects himself. Because he also knows that he's done what he's come here to do. When you and I start to liberate to reveal that which we want to be revealed within us, when we know what our life purpose is, when we start to say, this is why I came to this planet, it was to reveal this, the unique way that I can do it, we set ourselves free, we set that inner splendor free from within us. We start to liberate it. And so that's what we are doing with living creatively, is trying to set that free. When the founders, we celebrated the Independence Day a couple of days ago. That's why I'm playing around with my red, white, and blue theme here today. When the founders of our country wrote the Declaration of Independence, they set free the idea of a nation where we could pursue life, liberty, where we could have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That wasn't happening on the planet very much in their day. But they wrote it up and said, when in the course of human events it becomes time for a people to say, basically, enough of anything else unlike this, we are going to free the concept of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. They created something that hadn't been here before. And it took a bold step. Each of those signers of the Declaration of Independence, had it not worked out well, were signing their death warrant, and they all knew it. Sometimes living creatively takes living with risk. You might get disapproved of. It might not work out. You might fail. We talked about that a couple of weeks ago. There is no failure. There's lessons we learn and stuff to get over, but we don't fail. They set themselves free, and they set the idea of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness free. And we today get to enjoy that. This teaching would not be here in a country that did not have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This teaching is a uniquely American teaching. It came out of the Transcendentalists. It came out of Emerson and Thoreau and all those people who started to say, just less than 100 years later, in the 1830s, 1850s, and 60s, right in the same place where, Concord, Massachusetts, where the whole thing started to say, hey, wait, this is a different way to view the world. When they signed that Declaration of Independence, they had no idea what they were setting free. You are set free because of them directly. Take a breath. Maybe silently thank them for that. So creativity, the other thing about creativity is it is activating spirit. It's activating spirit. It's living creatively. You know, the other day I was in Michael's, the store, and I was getting a piece of art framed. And there was a guy there who was pulling these wonderful drawings out of his sketchbook, and he was getting some framing done for his work. And I kind of looked over at the guy and went, wow, those are really cool. And he goes, this is actually, I'm just a landscaper, but I like to doodle on the side. I'm like looking at these doodlings going, okay, how can I buy those before he finally figures out how much they're actually really worth, you know? They were gorgeous, but he just doodles on the side. But his doodling is setting free his inner nature. It's funny because he heard that I was a minister, and he said, well, I'm an atheist. He says, but I actually do believe that there's kind of a spirit within everything. And he says, when I'm really working the ground, he says, I love to do physical labor to express that spirit. I'm sitting there going, you know, you'd love my church. You really ought to come, you know. But just basically kind of about what we teach. But we have to activate the spirit. We have to not just think creatively, we have to live creatively. I was having a conversation with a couple of people recently, and they said, you know, this community is just kind of a blue-collar community. I said, you know what? I'm fine with that. See, I come from, as many of you know, Seattle. And Seattle always makes the list of the most educated and the most well-read cities and all that stuff. And I like to tell the story, you may have heard this before, that when my wife and I were moving out of Seattle, we put out a request to several hundred friends in the Seattle church that we would really like some help moving. And they all said, we'll know your highest and greatest good in your move. We'll know your ease and grace in your move. And we went out and hired a couple of South American laborers to actually help us do the move, because not one of those highly educated, really loving and wonderful people would come and pick up a box. When I arrived here, there was 5 people waiting for me at the storage locker to help unload my truck into the storage locker. And a month ago when I was ready to move, there was 8 guys, people helping me to move. It wasn't just guys either. There was 8 people there helping me to move. We knocked it out in 2 hours, 2.5 hours, something like that. And then another half a dozen people who showed up later on to help me unpack. Thank you. I like a community where you can activate spirit. And so that's what we do, is we want to live creatively. So it's not just a theory, it's not just a nice idea, but how do I actually apply this to my life? How do I actually embody love? How do I actually embody joy? And so to activate spirit, we must first free ourselves from all that is not spirit. And so what that takes, first of all, is a practice of deep listening. As the poem said, this wonderful poem that we started off with, the poet's task is simple. He looks for quiet. It doesn't say he runs out and reads through a whole bunch of books to get an idea about what kind of a poem can I write? Who should I copy? What great poet that's already said something should I, plagiarize off of? It said he looks for quiet. He seeks first the kingdom of God, which is in the still small voice. One of my favorite practices of looking for quiet is called visioning. Reverend Sue just led a wonderful visioning this morning, which she does every single month on the first Sunday of the month. And if you haven't been there, it's a fabulous way to sit and listen to Spirit. So we seek the quiet instead of trying to make an answer happen. How many besides me have tried to make an answer happen in your life? Yeah. How does that work? Real good? Not too good, okay. Yeah, sometimes it works good for a short period of time, but then usually it kind of goes sour. And sometimes it just doesn't work out at all. So we seek first the kingdom of God. We sit and listen for the answer. Visioning is listening for Spirit's idea. And I have to laugh because I've done visioning for years and I've guided other people in visioning, and I've seen all sorts of things happening around visioning. And sometimes I walk in and I start to distribute the sheets that have the questions on them so that people can, during the visioning process, make notes. But instead what they do is they look at the sheets, and before we've ever visioned a moment, before we ever even started, they'll start filling out the sheets. Oh, I know what Spirit's idea is about this. It's like, have you taken the time to sit and listen? Well, no, but I already know. That's condition-based thinking. That's your past recreating over and over again. Another time I was leading a church, and this particular church had a couple of doors that didn't quite close all the way when they were unlocked. And we were doing a visioning, what's the highest vision for this church? And one of the people answered, doors to close all the way. Now that's a helpful thing. It's nice to have the doors closed all the way, but is that really the Spirit's highest vision for a church? That's it? If we get the doors closed, we've fulfilled our mission. We can close the doors now and go on. So, that's creation and not creativity. So when we're visioning, we purify ourselves. It's like we're entering into the temple. We're entering into our own inner sanctum. We take the time to get quiet. We take the time to let everything else settle away. We take the time to turn off the cell phones. We take the time to turn off the Tour de France and the other things on TV. We take the time to become quiet and still and start to listen to the quiet. Not even listening for an answer, just to listen to the quiet. And in that quiet, we begin to contact that inner essence of ourselves. In that quiet, creativity can begin to arise through us. And then we can start to give it the voice, the action. But it comes from a very different place than trying to figure it out and make it happen. When we tap an idea from the infinite, it's like we allow it to be put in motion through us. Instead of making it happen, we make it welcome. We allow it, we invite it to move through us, to guide us not only in what it is, but how to make it happen. Most of us won't go for our dreams because we can't, on the intellectual level, figure out how to make it happen. It's one of the biggest traps we fall into. And if we will stop trying to figure out how, and start listening for what wants to emerge through us, recognizing the same power that knows exactly what wants to emerge through us, knows how to bring it about through us, we start to make it welcome. And we, as Emerson says, get our bloated nothingness out of the way of the divine circuits. Because our bloated nothingness is that within us which absolutely knows how to make it happen. I know how to make it happen. I know how to do that. Instead of allowing it to just unfold. The first guideline of the Taoist Shui Ho, we are to have life motion, that life motion, manifest the unique spiritual resonance that the artist catches in things, inspired as he or she is by their communion with the spirit of the cosmos. We are to let the life motion manifest it. Ernest puts it this way: the mind must conceive before the creative energy can produce. So we have to create an opening. The life energy is always present. We have to create an opening. We have to perceive. We have to conceive. What is it that I want to reveal? We must supply the avenue through which it can work. It is ready and willing. It springs into being through our thought and action. So we tap into it first. We open the channel. We get quiet. We start to listen. We allow it to come through because it's always broadcasting. It's always on. It's always expressing. And all we got to do is say, welcome, yes. And it moves through us and expresses. Take a breath. We don't have to figure it out. So your homework this week. You ready for homework? How can I live more creatively? Number one, take time to cultivate the divine. Take time out of your schedule to cultivate the divine. Take time to be quiet, to listen, to seek quiet, to purify your thoughts and your feelings. And purify doesn't mean, oh my God, I've got to, whatever. It just simply means let them fall away. Last Sunday I was down at the Sacramento Church. They did this wonderful guided meditation, and what they had you do is anything, if you're visualizing love, take anything that's unlike love and imagine you're blowing it into a balloon, and let the balloon just float away and be transformed by love. Whatever you want to do. If you're here to manifest peace, and you're here to manifest peace if you're living in a chaotic situation. You're here to manifest love if you feel that you're living in an unloving situation. If you notice that all the people around you are really stupid and making dumb decisions, guess what you're here to manifest? Wisdom. Okay? You're the one who's being called. Will you answer? So your first step in the homework is to be quiet, to take the time to cultivate the divine. Secondly, ask, what wants to be birthed through me now? What is it that not I want to, but what is it that infinite presence through me wants to birth through me now? So that's why we purify our thoughts. We set aside our agenda first, and then we ask the question. Most of us bring the agenda to the question. We set aside the agenda, and then we ask the question. What wants to be birthed through me now? And allow not just the idea, but also the form to be revealed. Begin to see it as a form, and allow the form to be revealed. So if I am to be love, how am I to be love in my life? If I am to be wisdom, how am I to be wisdom in my life? Because the infinite presence will not tell you what it is that's to be birthed, it will tell you how. The thing is, when most of us hear the how, we sit there and go, is there a different way? I really have to go make amends with that person that I really hate? And I really have to stop doing this or not doing that? So we allow the form to be revealed, and we take a breath, we listen, and we say, yes, I'm willing to let that happen too. Then finally, we be willing to play outside the box. Creativity will take you places you haven't been before. That's the good news, bad news of creativity. It will take you where you haven't been before. And that's part of the great adventure, but it's also scary, especially if you're the kind of person who likes to play safe. We all have that within us. Creativity will take you where you haven't been before. Be willing to play outside the box. Be willing to make mistakes. It's not a right, wrong, success or fail process. You're just here to allow as much of it as possible to manifest through it. The founding fathers didn't have to see 200 years in the future what was going to happen to America. All they had to do was say, yes, I'm willing to be this place right here, right now. They didn't even know the outcome of the Revolutionary War that was already underway. All they could say was, I'm willing to be this place right here, right now, that holds this consciousness. Are you willing to allow yourself to be played with by Spirit, which always plays in love, which always plays in joy, which always plays in peace, which always plays in good, but sometimes rattles your cage? Yes. Are you willing to have your cage rattled by Spirit? Yes. Cool. So I invite you this week then to do that. I invite you to live creatively this week. I invite you to practice that. I want to close with one of my favorite poems. This is from the Chinese poet Chu Shi. It's a two-line poem. If we simply recognize the face of the eastern wind, if we simply recognize what is, if we simply recognize God God all around us, if we simply recognize the face of the eastern wind, each of the 1,000 flowers in red or purple is spring. We don't have to have the whole big picture. Each of us is spring. Each of us is the creative energy in form. We don't have to be all 1,000 flowers. I've heard spiritual people who say, we have to get so many people in alignment, in consciousness, in order to transform the world. No, we don't. There's only one who we have to get into alignment in consciousness in order to transform the world. If you're not sure who it is, have your neighbor poke you in the ribs and go, "It's you." Let's pray. Opening into spirit. Opening into that infinite playfulness, that infinite joy, that infinite creativity, that infinite love. That one life that is all there is. One and only one. We open to that. We recognize that it is not separate from us and we are not separate from it. It and we are one. If it is love, we are love. If it is joy, we are joy. If it is peace, we are peace. If it is life, vitality, and energy, we are life, vitality, and energy. If it is power, we are power. If it is wisdom, we are wisdom. And so we recognize that as our true divine nature. We recognize that we are artists. Here not to force something to happen, not to make something happen, but to reveal the inner splendor that is uniquely expressed as each of us. That each of us is the perfect flower of spring. It doesn't matter what color we are. It doesn't matter how old or how young we are. It doesn't matter what gender we are, what gender preference we are, what anything we are. Each of us is spring. Each of us is that refreshed new energy of spirit. Each of us is the creativity of the divine. So I speak my word that we simply say yes. Yes to that which is just trying to burst through us like a bud trying to open to full flower in the spring. We quit holding that back. We allow it to blossom as ourselves. It doesn't matter how long we've waited, how long we've held it away. The universe doesn't care. It just wants to blossom through and as us. And so we say yes to that blossoming. We say yes to the creativity of who we are. We say yes to the artist within us. We let go of our small thinking. We let go of our "I'm not really that good" stuff. We recognize that we are God in form. We allow ourselves to paint and to sing and to write poetry with life itself. Whether we ever put anything on canvas, we have the canvas of life to paint on. The song of the universe to sing. The poetry of the stars to write. And so we allow that to come through us. And for all the good that comes out of that, for all the blessing, the revealing, the perfecting of who we are, and the perfecting of everything that comes out of that, I am so grateful. For the Spirit and the infinite that is behind, within, and as it all, I am ever so grateful. And so we call it good. We allow it to move through us. We simply say yes and open our doors wide. And it is done. And together we say, and so it is. Thank you. Good morning. Our talk today is on living creatively. We're surrounded by all this creation, beautiful music, and a star of our own, and each of you. Did you notice the star over your head? Just look up, see the star over your head. It's there. Each of us is a star. My friend Michael Beckwith says that creation is always happening. It's always going on. But creativity is not. If we want to look at creation and what creation is going on, we just notice the world today. Lots of creation is happening in the world. It's just happening. Creation is the Spirit moving through us in our kind of just same old state, without really thinking clearly, or without just kind of repeating the same old patterns over and over again. Have you noticed that we're in the world kind of repeating some of the same old patterns we've done over and over again? Still a little war, a little famine, little haves and have-nots, and all that stuff still going on. I was teasing the first service that I'm not as old as Bob Rock. I'm only about a third of his age, but for those of you who know Bob. But even I've been around long enough to realize that it still seems like the same story going on and on. That's creation. The infinite is always, always, always manifesting through law, through us. But we're the ones who direct it. Creativity is when we get out of our stuff, out of our normal way of being, and start to listen to the infinite and start to allow ourselves to create from that consciousness. Very different than creation. It still invokes the same law, but it's very different. So we're going to talk today about how do we do that? How do we live creatively? How do we start to get out of our same old, same old? Anybody besides me ever get stuck in that? Yeah, great. A couple of hands up, yeah. Me too, I'll throw a foot into up there too. So usually I have to pull the feet out of my mouth because I've been stuck in the same old, same old. But so we're going to look at that, and it just happened this weekend that I was unpacking my back bedroom, well, it's called a guest bedroom number 3, but it was really more of a storage locker at the moment. Some of you know that I just moved into my house about a month ago, but in a couple of weeks, my daughter and her fiance are coming up to stay. They're going to come to my installation, and I realized that since I'm not installed and I'm not formally here, I'm still going to be informal. Right? I'm loose. I'm not up on the wall there, bolted and installed on the wall, so I can still be loose. I can move around the stage. Hi guys, you're following me with the camera. There goes Michael. We have a new camera. I'm very glad. So we get to watch that. I want to thank the endowment committee and all the people who have contributed to that, because they made available a whole bunch of funds as they do every year for projects around the church. And one of the projects that the sound team asked for was a new camera, because with the old camera, if you ever notice, most speakers were stuck from about, well, let's see, here to about here, and that was kind of the range. And if you moved out of that, they could sort of move the camera, but it kind of went jerk, 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 jerk like that. This one flows, right? Michael, am I flowing? I'm flowing. And so I want to thank Michael Bordeaux and Damien for installing the camera. They came in a week and a half ago and spent a couple of days chasing ghosts, because they were getting ghost images in there and getting that all worked out. And I want to thank the endowment committee and all who contributed to that for making that possible. So thank you. But we get to flow. And so as I was unpacking my back bedroom, I found a book that I bought back when I was in college, back when I was an art major, called Creativity and Taoism. This is the 1968 edition, which tells you how long I've had this. And I love this book. I get into it every once in a while because it's such a fabulous treatise on creativity and Taoism and putting that together. And I've always said that as a religious scientist, I'm really a Taoist who's learned how to work with the mind and apply Taoism to the 20th and 21st century. That's what I love about this teaching. And so Taoism has the idea that the Tao is the infinite flowing through all of creation. Okay, and we are just that. We are part of that. It's not some big guy sitting up there in the sky going, like you, don't like you. And so I wanted to play with some of the ideas out of this book, and I wanted to start off first by reading a wonderful poem. This is one of those wonderful, deep Chinese poems that just kind of makes you kind of ponder for a moment. It goes by so fast, you have to catch it. The wild geese fly across the sky above. Their image is reflected upon the chilly water below. The geese do not mean to cast their image on the water, nor does the water mean to hold the image of the geese. When we start to move into creativity, when we start to move into creation, we don't have to make it happen. We don't have to mean to create beauty. See, the geese are just being geese, and the water is just being water. But at that moment, if we just take that moment and think about it and observe it, here's this quality of beauty. How many of you have ever seen geese flying across the water and just you see the reflection, or something similar to that? You're by a still lake, and all of a sudden you see the trees and maybe a bird flying overhead. And it's not trying to be beautiful, is it? Is it? Just checking. It's not trying to be beautiful. It's just being the expression of the beauty, and we perceive the beauty. We get to witness the beauty. When we start to be our authentic selves, our true selves, we release the beauty that we truly are. We don't have to try. Many of us have tried to be beautiful. Many of us have tried to be successful. Many of us have tried to be something, but we don't have to try. So without meaning to, they release this beauty. They are just part of it. And so to live creatively, when we want to live creatively, our minds need to be reflections of the infinite. Because the infinite is the source of creativity. When we start to be reflections, when we start to open our minds, when we start to say, not my will, but thine be done. Not my ego agenda, but that which wants to come through me. We start to be more creative than we've ever been, and we're not working in just creation out of the same old, same old, same old. We start to open to that infinite presence. Jesus also said it this way, seek ye first the kingdom. I love this poem that we started off with, the opening line of it. The poet's task is simple. He looks for quiet. He doesn't go poring over books of other poets and says, what's a good line? What's a good word I can use and drop into here? He doesn't say, who can I plagiarize? Who can I riff off of? The poet looks for quiet. Seek ye first the kingdom of God. And then he speaks to what he finds there. And I love the way he refers it to Blake. It's like working with the fierceness of acid on metal, melting apparent surfaces away. How many of you have apparent surfaces in your life that you know that if you melted them away, there was something far deeper and far more wonderful beyond that? And so we start to listen to that. And then it displays the infinite which was hid. When we start to melt away the surfaces, and we have created the surfaces ourselves, or we've allowed them to build over time. This person doesn't like me. I don't like that person. This is just the way things are. Those are the surfaces, and when we start to melt them away, something new can come out. But we have to be in the consciousness not of creation, but of creativity. Are you with me? So when we get into that consciousness, Goethe says if you would create something, you must first be something. So what do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to be? Do you want to be love? Do you want to be joy? Do you want to be peace? Do you want to be wisdom? Do you want to be power? Do you want to be grace? Do you want to be the star that you are? What is it you want to be, and you allow that to come through you? Not what's my idea of what I have to do or what somebody else thinks I should do, but what is it that I'm here to be? And so we start to tap into that. We start to listen to that. I want to play with a couple of quotes. One comes from Ernest Holmes, and the other one comes from the Tao Te Ching. Ernest says, we are surrounded by an intelligent force and substance from which all things come, the ultimate essence in the invisible and subjective world of all visible and objective forms and conditions. So the ultimate essence in the invisible and subjective world of all visible and objective forms and conditions. It's all there in the invisible. Mary Morrissey in our Prosperity Plus class puts it this way: all things are created twice, first in mind and then in form. The chair you're sitting in, this church we're living in, the car you drive, was first created in thought. Somebody thought of that chair. Excuse me, somebody thought of this church. I said I wouldn't do it, and there I have to do it. It's a thought. It choked. It caught in my throat. Excuse me. But we have this thought. If you guys would hold my clear throat in mind, I would in consciousness. I would appreciate that very much, because it's still tickling away. Do we let the thought come through? The form is in the invisible. The form is already in the mind of the divine. It's invisible until we see it. The Tao Te Ching puts it this way. That which is called Tao is indistinct and ineffable. Ineffable and indistinct, yet therein are forms. Indistinct and ineffable, yet therein are objects. Deep-seated and unseen, therein are essences. When we start to use the acid to work away the surface within, wow, are the essences, are the things, are the forms. And if anybody has a...
Let's just do another 2-minute silence.
Yeah, let me get myself back together again.
Pretty just shut your eyes. Or all cough at once while he's talking.
Yeah. Let's just all have a community working out of whatever is blocking this. I got this.
We can do this.
My throat chakra is clear and unblocked. All right, I can express myself. There we go, I'm better. Thank you, I'm back. Within the Tao, within the invisible, are all these forms. Sorry about that. Within the Tao are all these forms. Within the mind of God, within the infinite, are all these forms. Invisible. We are here to bring them into form. Because have you noticed you're playing in form? We have these bodies that choked up, you know. We have a pedestal, we have the church, we have the chair, we have all this stuff. We're in form. Yes? You've noticed. Sometimes that's fun, sometimes it gets a little choked up. So we seek not to be created, but to be God in form. We start to ask not how can I create what I want, but what is it that wants to be created through me? What am I open to? What am I willing to let happen? Michelangelo, when he was talking about the statue of David, probably his most famous statue of all time, says that he saw in the block of marble the David, and he cut away everything that was not the David. When we start to listen to Spirit, we see in Spirit the form of who we are to be, what it is that wants to be released through us, our hidden splendor that wants to come through us, and we start to release everything that is not that. We start to let that go. It's not that we have to make it happen. I remember years ago I was praying for a relationship. That was before I was married. I was praying for a relationship. And for some reason I kind of had the idea that, I'm good, thanks Luke. I had the idea that I had to make it happen. And I suddenly one day remember waking up and realizing, wait, she's already on the planet. It's like she doesn't have to be made from somewhere and then installed on the surface of the planet. She's already here. This relationship is already here in the mind of God. All I'm here to do is allow it to form. Your good, your right work, your financial abundance, your healthy body is already here. And we just take away everything that's not that. Take a breath. So that's how we play with creativity. We're allowing it to unfold. We're cutting away that which is not the David. When the artist reveals the reality concealed in things, he sets it free, and in turn he liberates and purifies himself. When you find that which you're supposed to be, you not only set it free, but you also liberate yourself and you purify yourself. You become who you're meant to be. How many of you have had at least even a moment, a glimpse of feeling that feeling of being who you're supposed to be? When you knew that you were right on task, even if it was for 5 seconds, you knew that you were where you were supposed to be, doing what you were supposed to do, being the right person at the right time in the right moment. How many? Great. And the rest of you, it's there for you. I invite you to at least imagine it, to be open to it. When you start to set that free, when you start to set it free more consistently, not only does it liberate that which wants to be expressed through you, and when we liberate that which wants to be expressed through us, it blesses not just us, it blesses the world. So, we talked about the camera that we've just got, this brand new camera that the endowment committee got, which is basically off of your contributions into here. And most of you say, well, that's nice, it's just for kind of our community and like that. Do you know how many hits we get on our website from around the world? We get a ton of hits on our website from China, from France, from all over Europe, from Africa, from Australia, of people who watch the video of our services here in Little Redding, California. Because of people like you who contribute to the endowment fund, to the operation of this church, and to keep it going, we touch lives of people who have no chance of ever having a religious science church anywhere near them, at least in the near future, and they can start to hear the message. We have no clue how much, when we liberate that which is what we are, how it's going to affect people. So we liberate that, we let it go, we let it be, we send it out into the world. So you are here to set free the essence of the divine that's within you. And you're here to set it free in your own unique way. Because each of you is here to be your own unique self. Each of you sees things a little bit differently. Each of you expresses a little bit differently. Each of you loves a little bit differently. Each of you, your wisdom is a little bit different. We have several artists in the room that I know of, and each of them does something a little bit different. They do it their own unique way. They express the beauty of this universe in a unique way. Each of you who have been mothers or fathers express motherhood and fatherhood in a unique way. Your own unique way. And so we're here to be that. We're here to allow that to come through us and to not denigrate it and to not say, oh yeah, well, everybody's done that. See, Phoebe's cast that's going to express this play is going to express it differently than it's ever been expressed before. Even though there's a script, and they're going to read through the script or actually act out the script, they won't be sitting there with pages reading through it, but they're going to be their own unique expression of that. You are going to be your own unique expression of you, of the infinite that wants to come through you, of the creativity that wants to express through you, and that's why you're here. If God didn't need you here, you wouldn't be here. Yes? Yes. So it is. We celebrated a couple of days ago the anniversary of our Independence Day. And we had the founders of our country who signed a document called the Declaration of Independence that basically started off, we went in the course of human events, and what they established was a nation where we could have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now when they signed that a couple hundred years ago, a little bit over a couple hundred years ago, that was a novel concept in the world. That you would have a country where you could actually pursue life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Remember, they came from Britain, which was ruled by the monarchs and ruled by the parliament. They had no representation of who they could be in the British parliament. That was what part of the war was about. They wanted no taxation without representation was one of their sayings. They wanted to be represented, and when they couldn't, they finally said, "The heck with it. We're going to establish our own country." Okay, that's a novel idea. You and I are blessed by that in ways that we don't even think of. This teaching would not have started in any other country because this teaching is about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. By us, not by the monarchs, not by only the rich, but all of us get to pursue life, liberty, and happiness. Is that a good deal? Yes. Okay. And so they started that off not knowing what it would be like 200 and some years later. They were just hoping they'd make it through the war and win, because if they didn't, they had just signed their death warrant for the British. But that willingness to allow that divine idea to move through them and to say, yes, we are here to make that happen. We're here to speak it and write it and then make it happen into form, into action, allows us to have what we have today. It rippled out and rippled out and rippled out. And how many other countries thereafter started to do the same thing? So we never know what we're going to do. Creativity is activating spirit. It's one thing to have a nice idea. How many of you have had nice ideas that you've done nothing about? Okay? So we've all done that. Does it bless the world? No. It's just a nice idea that takes a couple laps through your head, and then a year later you see that somebody else has already done it, and you see them on TV, they're famous, they're rich, they're happy, they've got the cute guy or the cute gal beside them, or whatever, and you're sitting there going, dang, probably stronger language than that, dang, I had that idea. When I first moved to Seattle, I kept running into people who sat there and go, I could have owned Microsoft stock. I knew those guys back then, and I could have owned Microsoft stock back in the early 80s. Or I could have had property down in downtown Seattle or up on Queen Anne, which is a kind of a prestigious neighborhood just north of the downtown area. I could have. And they walk around telling that story over and over again, it's like, well, so why didn't you? And if you didn't, why aren't you looking for that opportunity now? Because guess what? The next Microsoft is present right now. The next, how can I own property? Seattle was expanding like gangbusters in those days, and there was still cheap property available in the outlying parts of town. They could have gone out and bought some of that property, and by today they'd be millionaires. But no, they stuck to their story of, I coulda. Condition-based thinking, not creativity. Okay? And so we don't activate spirit. We whine and complain and as I say, B&M, bitch and moan about spirit. Can I say that? So we have to activate spirit. We have to set it free. And it's not just enough to know that idea. I was sharing with the first service that I love this community. I was talking with somebody the other day and said, well, we're just kind of a blue-collar community. I called, on Facebook, I insulted a few members of the community by inferring that they were uncultured because they didn't know what TDF stood for, which is Tour de France, which has started yesterday, which is my favorite time of the year. Some people live for the FIFA World Cup. That's a soccer game. And some people live for the Super Bowl. I hear that's another form of football. I'm also a big football fan, so, but I live for the Tour de France, which is a 3-week-long bike race. And as a friend of mine says, it makes the FIFA World Cup look exciting, which is 90 minutes of kicking a ball around. Anyways, but I love it. And so it started yesterday, and I posted on Facebook that something about that, and a couple people said, what's TDF? And I went, well, for the uncultured, it's the Tour de France. And so as I shared with somebody who's in the congregation today, I said, I can insult millions of people with just one comment on Facebook these days. It took a long time in the old days before Facebook. So we want to activate spirit. We want to start to bring it in. And what I was going to say, what I do love about the blue-collar nature of this community is that when my wife and I moved out of Seattle, and Seattle is always held up as one of the intelligent cities of the country, right? It's got the most educated and the best-read people, either number 1 or number 2 in almost any survey you ever read, okay? And so when we were moving out, I put out requests to hundreds of members of the Center for Spiritual Living Seattle, where had been longtime members and longtime practitioners and ministerial students and very involved with, if they would help us to move. And they all wished us well. We know your move will go with ease and grace. We know the highest and best for your move. And we hired a couple of South American laborers from the local labor market there to come and help us actually pack the boxes and move, because not a single person showed up to help pick up a box and move it. Here I arrived, and I pull into town, there's like 5 people waiting in my storage locker, to help me unload the boxes, and then something like 10, when I moved from the storage locker over to the place where I'm at now, 10 who came and physically helped me move. We knocked that out in like 2.5 hours, and then half a dozen more people who showed up later on to help me unpack. It was the most supported move I've ever had, and I like that. That's called activating spirit. That's not called it's a divine idea in the mind of God. That's called it's a divine idea in the mind of God, and I'm going to put it into motion. And that's when it blesses people. That's when you bless people. So I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time telling you to activate spirit, because I have a feeling that for many of you, you already do. Right? So it's like tapping into that. What is it that wants to come through me? So we start to get in touch with that, we start to do the spiritual practice of deep listening. We start to ask, we start to listen to that quiet, we start to simply ask, what is it that wants to come through me? We start to open up an avenue of awareness. The process of visioning, Reverend Sue does a wonderful visioning at the beginning of each month at 8 o'clock. And I know for those of you at the 10:30 service, 8 o'clock is an inconceivable time, but it really does exist, and there really are people who are there. I wasn't this morning, I was watching the Tour de France, but, sorry. But visioning is a wonderful process for sitting and listening to God, sitting and listening to your spirit within, asking, what is it that wants to be birthed through me? What is it that wants to come through me? So we take the time, we purify. It's like we're entering the temple. We're entering a sanctuary, the sanctuary within us. We take time to purify our thoughts and our feelings. We set them, and that simply means we set them aside so that we can be absolutely pure when we walk in. We're not carrying in our old conditioning. We're not carrying in our old feelings. We're simply sitting in a pure state of spiritual nakedness, if you will, listening to the infinite love that wants to just broadcast to and through and as us. Take a breath and just feel that for a moment. What is it like to be absolutely quiet and just listen with nothing else, no other chatter going on? To just listen to the quiet. And so we take the time to start to purify ourselves. We take the time to start to listen into that quiet. We take the time to ask what wants to emerge from that quiet. I've worked with a number of people with visioning over the years. And sometimes when I've done visioning, I've seen people, I give out a sheet of paper that has about 4 questions I kind of ask normally on a visioning. And I've had people that I hand out the questions as they're coming into the visioning. I kind of got gun shy after a while because people would sit and look at those and go, oh, well, the answer to this is this, and the answer to this is this, and the answer. And it's like they had never taken the time to stop and vision, and they were already answering the visioning questions. Guess what consciousness they were answering from? The condition-based, what they already knew, consciousness. We don't sit and listen to what's the highest vision of spirit. In my last church, we did a visioning for what's the highest vision for the church, and one of the people came up with, as she put it, blankies for cold congregants. Now, if you're cold and you want a blanket, that's great, but is that really the mission of the church? Is that really the highest vision of the church? If we provide you with a blanket, are we done? We can just say, hey, we've done our mission, we're here, we're good. So we open to what's the highest vision. See, that was low consciousness speaking, if you will. That was condition-driven consciousness speaking. What's the highest vision? What wants to be birthed through me? What do I want to dance with spirit as we put it earlier? Ernest Holmes says that the mind must conceive before the creative energy can produce. We must supply the avenue through which it can work. It is ready and willing. It springs into being through our thought and action. So we have this wonderful source within us that wants to broadcast and embody love and joy and beauty and all of that. But we have to say yes. We have to take our thought off of the old condition-based stuff of how am I going to do this and say yes to Spirit. Yes, I'm going to let this manifest through me. Yes, I am going to let Spirit show up through me as this way. And it may not be convenient. Have you ever noticed? It might not be convenient. It might not always be easy. Again, those 14 guys who signed that Declaration of Independence, like I said, if they had messed up, if the war hadn't gone the way they wanted it to, that was their death warrant. And they knew it. So Spirit isn't always convenient. It isn't always easy. Are we willing to let it show up anyways? So the law produces, and this is one of the hardest things for us to understand, the same infinite presence that gives us the idea knows how to produce it through us. It knows how. Most of us won't start on our grand spiritual idea that wants to blossom through us because we don't know how. Our conditioned mind, our small mind, doesn't know how. And it's the question most of us ask, well, I'm not going to do that because I don't know how. And it's the wrong sequence of things to do. Are we willing to let that infinite presence that gives us the idea also give us the how? In our visioning, are we willing to ask the question, not only what wants to be birthed through me, but how shall I let it be birthed through me? Phoebe and I were talking about her workshop, her Speaking of My Heart workshop, and that's exactly what happened. This idea came through, and it's like, well, how am I going to do that? And the next step came through, and the next step came through, and the next step came through, and all of a sudden she's sitting there submitting a class form with kind of, one hand kind of holding on for, dear life back here. What the heck am I doing? And that's sometimes how it feels with Spirit. What the heck am I doing? I had a nice plan to go apply to the Eureka Church in California. Nice, small church, safe, by the coast. Then Reverend Andrew came along and suggested, think bigger, apply to Redding. And it's like, holy, you know what? That's a much bigger church. And I've heard it has issues. Later on, one of my friends says, doesn't that her church have some issues? And I said, show me a church that doesn't. I went, oh yeah. We don't have to know the how. We have to be open to hearing the how. We have to be open to letting the how emerge through us. Are you willing to be that open to Spirit?
Yes.
Some of you are, some of you are not so sure. It's okay. I'm going to give you some homework this week. It'll help you out. So this week I want you to play with how can I live more creatively. Number 1, take a deep breath. Take time to cultivate your relationship with the divine, the infinite. That means listen, seek quiet, purify your thoughts. Let the thoughts and the feelings fall away and just take time to sit with no agenda whatsoever. Not trying to solve a problem, not even trying to get an answer. Just sit. Just seek quiet. Or maybe for you, seeking quiet is walking through nature. Whatever it is that you do to seek quiet, maybe it's gardening, whatever it is that you do to seek quiet, spend some time this week seeking quiet. Are you willing to do that? Yes. That's the simpler part. Secondly, once you're in that quiet stage, once you have purified and gotten into that place where you're not working with an agenda, just notice if a question comes. And the question might be, what wants to be birthed through me now? What wants to be birthed through me now? What would Spirit like to express through me? If you're ever with a loving friend, somebody who's you just love to be in their presence, and you just ask them, what would you like me to do for you? Perhaps it's somebody you love deeply and loves you deeply. It's that kind of thing. What would you like me to do for you? How can I express to you more? How can I be more of what you want me to be? And so that's your second step of the homework, is to just simply ask that question of this infinite love that you love, recognizing that you and it are one. Then finally and thirdly is be willing to play outside the box. Be willing to play outside the box, because I guarantee you, Spirit's answer will always be outside your box. Because your box is too small to play in for the infinite. If you're here to activate the infinite love and the infinite joy and the infinite good of God, at least to some degree, to some level that you can do it, it takes you getting outside of what you've ever done before. Take a breath, good deep breath. Be willing to play outside the box. How many of you are willing to play outside the box? And that doesn't mean you have to get wild and crazy and go 55 miles out of the box. You can just take a step out of the box. It's okay. All of the out-of-box experiences begin with a single step. There's an old Taoist saying about that, sort of like that too. Creativity takes place where you haven't been before. Creation takes place where you have been before. It just rolls around, circles around. It takes place where you've been before. Creativity takes place where you haven't been before. And so are you willing to let that creativity happen? And are you willing to make mistakes? Are you willing to have possibly the experience of, oh my God, you might fail? Are you willing to let go of the idea of success and failure, right, wrong, has to be a certain way, and allow yourself to just simply be in the dance of spirit, to be dancing with that spirit? So that's your homework this week. 3 things. Quiet, spend some time in the quiet, ask and listen, and then activate spirit, get outside the box. Play with what it says. Are we good? Go forth and do your homework, but not yet. We have a couple things. I'm going to close with one of my favorite Chinese poems. It comes from an ancient poet named Chu Shi. It's one of those 2-line poems. It's going to go by real quickly, so be with me. If we simply recognize the face of the eastern wind, each of the 1,000 flowers in red or purple is spring. If we simply recognize the face of the eastern wind, if we simply recognize the infinite presence, that which is, the eastern wind was always the fresh, it was where spring comes from. East is where the new comes from. If we simply recognize the face of the eastern wind, if we simply recognize that which wants to be born through us, it doesn't take all of the 1,000 flowers to be spring. Each of them is spring. Each of you is the spring of spirit, being born anew. Each of what you bring here is the spring of spirit. We hear people who talk about, we got to change the world. We got to get a certain number of people to change their consciousness all around the world, and we'll get that 100th monkey syndrome, and it will happen. No, you don't have to. Each of you is the flower of the divine. Each of you embodies spring. There's only one consciousness that you ever have to change. It's the person sitting next to you. No, I'm sorry. It is you. It's the person sitting next to them whose consciousness that you have to change. Are you willing to be the flower of spring? Yes. Are you willing to allow that spring freshness to burst forth through you, to be the flower that wants to blossom as you in consciousness and in form? That's your homework this week. That's your living creatively this week. So let us anchor that in prayer. So taking a deep breath, we recognize that there is only one infinite love, one infinite presence. Pure good, pure love, pure joy, pure wisdom, dancing, delightful creativity that we see throughout the universe and beyond. There's so much more than even that. We recognize that because it is infinite, we have to be one of it. There's nowhere else to be. There is nothing outside of that one. There is nothing outside of it. We get to play in whatever aspect we want to, however high, however low. It's all the one. And we get to choose. And so I speak my word that today we choose. We choose to play in creativity, in the highest consciousness, the higher realms of that consciousness, the higher options, the greater good, the greater expressions of that love, that joy, that peace, that power, that harmony, that life energy and vitality that we are. We choose to play. We consciously choose to allow it to move through us and express its highest and greatest good. We are conduits and faucets for the divine, turned on full blast. We let that spring of life pour through us. We say yes to that which wants to be birthed through it. We let go of all the old conditioned thinking. We let go of all the stuff that says, I'm too old, I'm too young, I'm too this, I'm not enough that. I'm a guy, I'm a gal. We let go of all of that stuff that says we can't, and step into the realm of the infinite which doesn't know I can't. And so we allow our souls to dance through. We allow that blossom that wants to blossom through us. We simply say yes to it. We don't have to figure out the how. We just simply say yes to the process. And then we understand that that process blesses each of us. And then blesses way beyond us. And so we simply allow that blessing to flow. We are simply the yes of the divine. And for all the good that comes out of that, for all the beauty that comes out of that, for all the love and the joy and the harmony, I am simply grateful. For each person who says yes and activates spirit, I'm so grateful. And for the spirit within and through and as it all, I'm so grateful. And so we simply allow this to unfold perfectly, beautifully, with great power, with great joy, with great harmony in our lives. We simply let it be. We simply let spirit dance through us and do its thing through us. We let God be God as us today. And together we say, and so it is. Thank you.